Hello, and welcome to Where Art and History Collide, the podcast. Now, this is my very first ever episode, and I'm just over the moon to be able to bring this to you guys. In this first episode, I'm just going to explain, kind of who I am, what I do, and go from there. So, who is Whitney Weidow? Well, I'm an oil painter, and I would like to call myself a nostalgic impressionist. I don't really know if that's a genre, but you know what? It is now, and I'm the one that's doing all of these beautiful paintings around you. I started painting in 2019. Then in 2021, I got my very first award for the mayor's it was the Mayor's Award for the Best New Artist. I've been featured in Art of the West magazine. I am now in galleries in Bozeman, Park City, Jackson Hole, possibly Whitefish really soon, and Hamilton, Montana is in the works as well. I am also an elected board member of the Hamilton Downtown Association, where I get to make my hometown thrive, which is super, super exciting. So that's kind of my little journey. I am a professional full-time artist now. I just made the switch to being a full-time artist back in September of 2024. So this is my first year just gung-ho, going all in. A little bit about my backstory. I was born let's go way back, right? You want to know who I am. I was born in Utah, and I am one of 7 children, so I am the middle child, which means I had a little bit of middle child problems in my teenage years, but I got over that, and I'm somewhat calmed down now. And then I was never really an artistic kid. My family was fairly artistic. My uncles and on my mom's side were always artistic. My brothers did well in art class. But me, I just wanted to play sports. I fantasized about being a neurosurgeon. Oh, I'm sorry, not a neurosurgeon, a heart surgeon because of Hawkeye Pierce off of MASH. Loved that TV show. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then I got scholarships to become a nurse first and went to the University of Montana, flunked out, never went to school, hated it. Then I married the love of my life at 18, and we moved over to North Dakota, and I went to Dickinson State University where I played volleyball and softball, and I still hated it. So we moved home. I didn't go back to college because that was just a waste of my time and money, honestly. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. I enrolled into flight school later and loved that. I have my private pilot's license, and I was going to work my way up the totem pole as far as I got my VFR and then the IFR, and then you become an instructor, and then you can build up hours that way and then slowly get the higher trainings. And then I just kept having dreams that I was going to die, and I don't want to die yet, so quit that. And so I just flew for fun. And then I worked at a sushi restaurant, and then I started a little cleaning business. And that is how I met Gary Lynn Roberts. Now, if you don't know who Gary is, you should look him up. He's a very well-known, nationally known Western artist, and I got to clean his studio. And that is my first look into the art world. And I was blown away. I remember there was this one time after cleaning his studio, because I would get to sit and watch him a little bit here and there. And I was driving home, and the world just completely shifted. It changed. Everything changed. The colors were so vibrant. I didn't just see oh, that's green, oh, that's blue. No, I saw all of the hues in between and the tones in between, and I started seeing negative spaces. So if you have a tree, and you think about a tree, you think about, okay, there's the trunk, and then the round, if it's a nice, beautiful, bushy apple tree or whatever. Anyway, I started seeing the holes that are through the tree, so the sky that comes through, and the little tiny shapes out of that. And it just broke my world. It felt like I was tripping. I was on the best drug possible. And then it never stopped from there. And so I was given a beautiful, beautiful gift of, I would say, almost sight and appreciation, where I look at the world today through an artist's eyes, and it's literally like the best thing that you could even imagine. You get to notice the beauty, the complexity, the simplicity of everything. Think about the most mundane, boring thing, like an onion. And when you really look at that onion, or if you try to paint that onion or draw that onion, you get a deeper knowledge and appreciation of the beauty of an onion, right? And it seems kind of trivial, but there's so much that went into creating that. And so I got to really get an intimate look into our world. And it is crazy, crazy beautiful. So yeah, I started painting with Gary. After I'd clean his studio, I asked him, hey, it looks like so much fun. Can I paint, please? And he was just so nice. He's like, oh, hell yeah, girl, sit down and here's a canvas and paint. And so I painted, and it was absolutely god awful. I'm telling you, it was so bad, but I really, really enjoyed it. So every time I'd clean his studio, I would paint. And after a while, he sat me down, and my husband was like, okay, here's the game plan. You're going to be a professional artist. You're going to stop cleaning other people's houses, and I'm going to teach you how to paint, because this is what you need to do for the rest of your life. So my husband and I talked about it for a while, and I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. Let's just, sweet. I'm so excited. I get to learn how to paint, and a professional, world-renowned artist gets to teach me, of all people who never had an inkling, never picked up a paintbrush ever. Well, I mean, besides like in kindergarten when you do oil, like the silly stuff that you had to do. And so I got to immerse myself in the studio and learn how to paint. And so what you do when you learn how to paint, if anybody wants to figure out how to paint and they have no idea where to start, here's a little secret. Find an artist that you love. Like, you don't have to personally know them. Just go on Pinterest and start painting paintings that you really, really like, and start simpler paintings, and then copy those paintings. And that's exactly what I did. And, you don't sell those paintings because they're not your intellectual property, right? You don't get to profit off of other artists, but you get to learn how they did what they did. They're called master copies. And it really teaches you color and technique, and you get to break down something and figure out how to do it for yourself. So that's what I did. I started out with Brooke Wetzel. She's a local artist where I'm from, and she does very dreamy, moody landscapes. So I loved them. And then another artist where I'm from, his name's Brent Cotton, and he's just my all-time favorite artist in the whole entire world. And he does like realistic, tonalistic impression. I wouldn't say that they're not impressionism. They're very realistic, but they're moody and they're tonal and just I don't know. They're amazing. Anyway, I did one of his or a couple of his, and so that's where I got my mood from and the glow. And so I loved that, but I hated my landscapes. I did a few. Created a few, and I didn't like them. And so I was struggling that way. And then Gary was like, here you go, Whitney, plopped down a G. Harvey book and flipped open the page and said, paint that. And I looked at him like, you are crazy. There's no way I can paint that. And it's a street scene. I was like, there's no way I can paint that. He's like, well, just give it a try. And so I did. And it almost, I wouldn't say it came naturally, but it almost did, as far as it clicked. It made sense. And I fell in love with it. And so then I started painting a lot of G. Harvey's paintings. And obviously he's very influential in my work, because I've been like, oh, you look like G. Harvey. Yes, I do, because I love him. And I'm not trying to steal his stuff. I'm just so inspired by him, and I want to turn kind of what he did into something that I can do. Anyway, that was that. And so I started going down that way. And then I realized after I had painted, I did a couple like concept pieces where it was modern day businesses thrown back into the turn of the century, like with the get up and the car and the horse and buggy, or the old vintage cars, that kind of stuff. And I was at the Out West show, and I had his name was Ike Kaufman. He just recently passed away, unfortunately, but his family has kept a business since the 1800s, like the 1880s, I think. Maybe they started. It's Kaufman's Warehouse in Great Falls, Montana. And he was a huge historical buff. And he came in and looked at a painting of Great Falls, and I had Kaufman's in it, and he kind of like, oh, nice painting, but that's completely wrong. Like, the Liberty Theater didn't look like that. We weren't there at that time, like, because I had all of these, like, I think I found a picture from like the 70s maybe, and then I just threw it backwards. And so I had a streetcar in there and a woman in a Victorian dress. And so he kind of was just like, this isn't where things go, and just went on a little bit of a rant of where everything was. And I was like, you know what, you're right. I shouldn't be trying to represent your town through just not even knowing. And then I decided, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do all the research. I'm going to find the photographs to go off of first. And then I'm going to do the research to figure out which buildings were there. Because when you get a black and white photograph, you get an idea of a few of the buildings. Like, they'll have fairly good pixels or whatever that you can see a couple of the signs. And then I was just kind of making stuff up after that. I didn't really know. And I felt like it was just wrong, so I wanted to do it justice, and I wanted to bring the real historical elements, but tell it in a moody story that had color harmonies that don't necessarily exist in the real world, and so you'd get that beautiful glow from all of the street lights and the shops, and that represents kind of the hope and the nostalgia of the past when we look back on our pasts. And then I wanted the darker lit, maybe stormy skies to represent kind of the reality of those moments, as far as they weren't always just beautiful and bright, right? And so I loved that, and I've got a little bit of a dark side, so I like the darker, moodier stuff anyway. I don't really like to paint a whole lot of bright, happy scenes. I like the darker, moodier stuff. I mean, I even did a World War II series, and I'll talk about all of that later on. So yeah, that's just kind of where it evolved to, and why I do what I do. And this podcast is going to shed light on all of my findings and the historic references behind all of my paintings. So I get to take you for a journey and get to nerd out and geek out a little bit about what buildings were where, and some of the people that started those, and tell their stories a little bit, and the hard work and dedication and the beauty of the architecture that was back then. So it's going to range anywhere from 1880 to the 1960s, because I am in a gallery in Jackson Hole, and so I paint street scenes, obviously, and Jackson Hole didn't really come up to age until the 40s, and it really didn't start sparking until the 60s, so I'm forced to kind of move into more retro spaces, timelines, and that's going to be fun too. So yeah, that is me kind of in a nutshell, and why I'm doing this podcast. And even if nobody's listening, I don't really care, because this is for me, and it's going to help me connect with my subject matter a lot more and be able to give it a much more historically accurate representation, but not losing my artistic license. Like, I'm never going to chuck that out the window. I will plant trees where they weren't there, and I may move a couple signs here and there, but I'll let you know if I did. So yeah, that's my journey, and I'm excited to take you along. And thank you so much for even listening if you've listened this far. So what can you expect from this podcast? Obviously, I told you I'm going to do deep dives. I would love to future guests on. I would love to have historians. I would love some of my collectors I might reach out to and ask them if they can come on. I will also bring you into a little bit of... I'll bring you other artists. I'll bring you locals from those hometowns that I'm painting. And so, yeah. So if you are a history nerd or an artist or a collector, or you simply just want to reverse the clock and live in a simpler time, this is the podcast for you. So yeah. And next week, or not next week, I'm sorry, this next episode, I'm going to take you back to Austin, Texas. So in 1913. So make sure to follow along. You can hit that subscribe button. You can share it with a friend, maybe help a girl out. And you can always leave me comments, ratings, and reviews. And if I get anything wrong in these series, please don't hesitate to reach out. You know, I'm doing all of this research by myself, and I'm mostly using the internet. And the internet has some things wrong, but so I will eventually be able to go to all the archives and pour through everything myself. I do a lot of research through newspapers. So yeah, yay. Thank you again for listening. This is the Where Art and History Collide podcast. I'm Whitney Weidow, your artist and your host, and I'll be seeing you around.